What if everything you've built your life on was a carefully constructed illusion? Imagine returning to the one place that holds your darkest memories, only to find a secret that will redefine your entire existence. This is the story of a man who discovers his past is not just a memory, but a living, breathing little boy who looks exactly like him. Prepare for a journey of shocking revelations, heartbreak, and a love powerful enough to heal the deepest wounds. Ethan Hayes is a self-made man, the architect of a boutique restaurant empire that stands in stark defiance to his father's corporate monolith. He's escaped the shadow of his powerful father, Julian Hayes, but not the trauma of his childhood. Years ago, after his mother's tragic death, Ethan spent 2 formative years at the Havenwood Youth Centre, a place that both haunts and grounds him. Now, he dedicates his resources to giving the children there the stability he once craved. His life in Portland is a whirlwind of business deals and public appearances with his fiancée, Tiffany, a socialite who embodies the glamorous life he's supposed to want. But beneath the surface, a deep-seated emptiness gnaws at him, pulling him back to the small town of Havenwood, where the truth of his past awaits. The sleek glass of his high-rise office reflected a man who had everything. Ethan Hayes stared out at the Portland skyline, the city lights a glittering testament to his success. But the reflection felt hollow, a stranger wearing his custom-tailored suit. His phone buzzed, a persistent, annoying vibration against the polished mahogany of his desk. He didn't need to look at the caller ID. It was Tiffany. He let it go to voicemail, but it buzzed again immediately. With a sigh, he answered, holding the phone slightly away from his ear. "Ethan, what is the meaning of this?" Her voice was sharp, cutting through the calm of his office. He winced. "Tiffany, what's wrong now? What's so upsetting?" She was his fiancée, or at least she held that title. He'd never formally proposed. She had simply declared it so, and he hadn't possessed the energy to argue. He knew he should feel something more for her, but their relationship felt like another business merger, a strategic alliance of public images. He was tired of the strategy. He was tired of the game. What's upsetting me is that my fiancé is an idiot." Ethan winced, his tolerance for her manufactured drama wearing thin. "Tiffany, let's keep this civil," she scoffed. "Civil? I've been telling you for a week that I want to throw a proper holiday gala, the kind that gets us on the cover of Portland Monthly. And what do I find out? You're blowing the budget on those orphans again." The word hung in the air, dripping with disdain. A cold fury coiled in Ethan's stomach. "First of all, that's none of your business. Second, if you want a party, throw one, just not in my house and not with my money. And third, Tiffany," he paused, the decision solidifying in his mind with sudden, liberating clarity, "I think it's time you went home." There was a choked gasp on the other end of the line. "Home? So that's it? You used me for appearances and now you're done with me?" He sighed, the exhaustion returning. "Did I ever say I needed you, Tiffany? Coming here was your choice. You just showed up and moved in." She slammed the phone down, and the silence that followed was the most peaceful sound he'd heard all day. He had to get out of the city. He had to go back to Havenwood. The drive to Havenwood was a journey back in time. The cityscape gave way to towering pines and a persistent drizzle that washed the world in shades of grey and green. This was the town where he'd spent 2 years of his life, in a daze of grief and confusion. It was in the Havenwood Youth Centre that he'd slowly, painfully begun to heal. The memories were heavy, a weight in his chest. His father, Julian Hayes, a titan of industry in Chicago, had built an empire from the ground up in the cutthroat world of the 90s. With wealth came enemies. Julian had been warned, threatened over a hostile takeover, but he was a man who never backed down. The threats had escalated, targeting his wife, Elena. He'd assured her it was just psychological warfare. She had always believed him. That faith had cost her everything. They were attacked in Lincoln Park, a seemingly random mugging that was anything but. Elena fought for her son until her last breath. They took Ethan, but they had to kill his mother to do it. Julian Hayes received the news within minutes. His world shattered. He sent every man he had to find Ethan, while he raced to the hospital where they'd taken Elena. He was just in time to hear her last whisper, "Julian, save him." Then she was gone. For a moment, blind with rage and grief, Julian had pointed the gun he always carried at the doctor, his voice a broken command. "Save her!" The doctor, pale but steady, simply said, "She's gone. There's nothing we can do." The strength left Julian's body. The gun clattered to the floor as he collapsed to his knees beside the woman who was his entire world. The search for Ethan was frantic, a multi-state manhunt that lasted for 3 agonizing months, but the trail went cold. The police investigators started avoiding his calls. With every passing day, the hope of finding his son alive dwindled into a dull, constant ache in his soul. Ethan remembered the fear. It was a cold, suffocating blanket. He was only 5, but the terror was primal, absolute. He'd been found wandering near a truck stop, covered in bruises, his memory a black void. His mind, in a desperate act of self-preservation, had walled off the horror of watching his mother die. He couldn't remember his name, his parents, anything. Just a gnawing emptiness and a feeling of being hunted. After a stay in the children's hospital, he was transferred to the Havenwood Youth Centre, a small, underfunded facility 600 miles from his Chicago home. It was a quiet place, almost like a family, run by caregivers who hadn't yet been worn down by the system. For 2 years, he was a ghost. He would wake, eat, and then sit by the window waiting. He didn't know for what or for whom, but an instinct deep inside him told him to just wait. Someone was coming for him. The breakthrough came during Christmas. The centre had gotten a real tree, a bit lopsided and sparse, but its pine scent filled the common room. The staff brought in old ornaments from their own homes, and the children made paper chains. Ethan was given a small glass ball ornament with tiny foil stars inside. As he reached up to hang it on a branch, he froze. A memory, sharp and vivid, pierced through the fog. His mother, her warm smile, her voice saying the stars looked like trapped snowflakes. "Mom!" The word echoed in his mind, followed by a tidal wave of unbearable pain. "She's gone! And Dad! I lost Dad!" The fragile ornament slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. He crumpled, burying his face in his hands as sobs racked his small body. A caregiver, Eleanor Vance, rushed to his side, her gentle arms wrapping around him. "Ethan! What is it? What's wrong?" He looked up at her, his eyes wild with rediscovered grief. "They took her! They took my mom!" Eleanor immediately took him to see the centre's part-time child psychologist. For over an hour, Ethan spoke with his eyes closed, the dam of his memory broken, pouring out fragmented images of his past. The psychologist gave him a mild sedative to help him rest. As soon as he was asleep, Eleanor went straight to the centre's director. "We need to look at missing children's reports from 2 years ago, from Chicago. I think his father is a wealthy man. His mother was killed when they took him. I'm sure of it." The director was hesitant. "But that's so far away." Eleanor was firm. "I know, but we have to try." Within hours they had a name, Julian Hayes. The director, Eleanor Vance, took a deep breath and dialed the number for Hayes Industries. Her heart pounded as a cold, metallic voice answered. "Julian Hayes." She stumbled over her words, explaining she was calling from a youth centre. He cut her off. "Have you informed the police?" "No, not yet. We wanted to speak with you first." His voice was sharp. "Don't. I'm on my way." Julian's instincts, honed by years of corporate battles and personal tragedy, screamed at him. The moment the woman said youth centre, his heart had stopped. He knew with an unshakable certainty that they had found Ethan. But another thought, cold and sharp, followed immediately. If the local police in that town had failed to identify a boy whose face had been plastered all over the national news, it meant one of 2 things. They were either incompetent or compromised. The people who took Ethan could have connections, people on their payroll. Finding Ethan was a miracle, but it was also a danger. He barked orders at his driver. Alex, step on it. I don't care how you do it. Alex, his longtime head of security, glanced in the rearview mirror. Mr. Hayes, the roads are slick. Pushing it past 80 is a risk. Julian's voice was raw. To hell with the risk, Alex. Buy a new car. Buy 10. Just get me there. A second vehicle carrying his security team followed close behind. He wasn't taking any chances. Despite Julian's request, Eleanor eventually called the local police. 2 hours later, 2 officers arrived at the centre. Eleanor was stunned when one of them announced they were there to take the boy into protective custody. That's out of the question, she stated, her voice trembling slightly but firm. We are responsible for him. He's not going anywhere without a court order or a directive from social services. One of the officers took a menacing step toward her. Are you questioning a police order? Eleanor held her ground. Show me your badges. I want to call your supervisor. As she spoke, the second officer suddenly grabbed her, pinning her against the wall. Get the kid! Now! A social worker rushed to help, but was violently shoved aside. She would have fallen if a strong pair of hands hadn't caught her. In a flash, the 2 impostors were on the floor, restrained by large men in dark suits. A tall, imposing figure stood before Eleanor. It was Julian Hayes. I asked you not to call the police, he said, his voice quiet but filled with authority. Eleanor was flustered. I thought I had to. What if you were one of the men who hurt his mother? Julian's face tightened at the mention of his wife. Does he know about his mother? Yes, she answered softly. He remembered everything yesterday. Julian felt a desperate urge to see his son, to hold him, to make sure he was real. Where is he now? He's sleeping. The psychologist had to give him a sedative. Before Julian could ask another question, a cry echoed down the hallway, a sound that pierced through years of grief. Dad! Daddy! Julian turned slowly. A small boy stood in the doorway, his eyes wide and filled with tears. It was him. It was Ethan. Son! The word was a choked whisper. Julian moved down the corridor as Ethan ran towards him. He swept his son up into his arms, holding him tight, burying his face in the boy's hair. Ethan, my son. They were finally together again. They would never be separated again. The road to recovery was long. For months, Ethan woke up screaming from nightmares. But his father was always there, a constant, reassuring presence. They spent time at their lake house, Julian teaching him to fish and ski, slowly rebuilding the world that had been stolen from them. When Ethan started school, his focus shifted, and the trauma began to recede. One afternoon, when he was in 2nd grade, he approached his father. Dad, can we talk? Julian put down his paperwork. Of course, son. What is it? Ethan sat beside him. It's almost Christmas. At Havenwood. They were getting ready for Christmas when you found me. They didn't have many presents. The kids there, they're all waiting for parents to be their present. I got my present, but they have nothing. Can we go there? I have a lot of toys. We could bring them enough for everyone. Julian looked at his son, his heart swelling with a painful mix of pride and sorrow. He pulled Ethan into a hug. Of course, son. We'll go, and you don't have to give away your toys. I'll buy new ones. As they pulled up to the youth centre, the van loaded with gifts, Ethan stared at the familiar building, a thoughtful expression on his face. Eleanor Vance came out to greet them, her face breaking into a warm, surprised smile when she saw Julian step out of the driver's seat. Julian, is something wrong with Ethan? Just then, Ethan jumped out of the car and ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist. She hugged him back, her eyes misting over. Ethan, you've grown so much. I barely recognise you. He beamed up at her. I'm getting straight A's in school, Miss Vance. Julian smiled. What about that C in conduct? Ethan waved a dismissive hand. Dad, that's just behaviour, not a real grade. I'm working on it. Eleanor laughed, a musical sound that seemed to brighten the grey day. She looked at Julian. I don't understand. Are you just visiting? You could say that, Julian replied, his gaze lingering on her. Ethan missed you all. He gestured to the van. We didn't come empty-handed. Do you have a few people who can help unload? He slid open the side door, revealing a vehicle packed to the ceiling with boxes and bags. Eleanor gasped. What is all this? She picked up a box. A brand new doll. She picked up another. A board game. These are for the children, for Christmas? Julian felt an unfamiliar awkwardness. Giving gifts completely altruistically was a new experience. It seemed so simple, yet when he looked into Eleanor Vance's eyes, he felt a profound connection. They were grateful, surprised, and shimmering with unshed tears. He could have spent an eternity describing the colour and light in her eyes, but she quickly looked away. He found himself thinking, she can't be much older than 35, and she's already a director. They decided to unload the gifts after the children were asleep to maintain the surprise of Christmas morning. The entire staff pitched in. Eleanor was as excited as a child herself. Dolls! We have so many girls and almost no decent dolls. They have to take turns to play. The thought struck Julian as deeply wrong. Why should a child have to wait in line to play with a battered old toy? That night, watching the joy on the children's faces as they opened their gifts, he made a decision. He and Ethan would come back every year. It became their tradition, a pilgrimage of gratitude and giving. Years passed. When Ethan turned 23, his father began to talk about expanding the family business. You know, son, Julian said one evening, together, you and I could conquer the world. While I still have the strength, we can achieve great things, Ethan laughed. Dad, what are you talking about? You're not planning on retiring, are you? Not yet, but time moves faster than you think. Trust me. Ethan had his own ideas. He had been meticulously researching underserved markets, looking for an opportunity to build something of his own. He spread a series of market analyses across the large oak table in his father's study. Dad, I've been looking into where our kind of investment is scarcest. I have a proposal for you. Julian leaned in, intrigued. Show me. I can see you've done your homework. It's a lot easier now than it was for your generation, Ethan admitted. You guys were true pioneers. No internet, no instant data. You had to wait weeks for answers or fly across the country. It was a different game. Julian smiled. You're right. Everything is too fast now. There's no romance in it anymore. They worked late into the night. When they finally finished, Julian looked at his son with immense pride. You've got a brilliant mind, Ethan. If you can find the right property, you have my full backing. We'll set it up as a subsidiary, but it will be your company to run. Your vision. You want me to be the CEO? Dad, I don't have enough experience. I had less than you when I started, Julian countered, and I was about your age. Go for it, son. It's your time. The town of Havenwood greeted Ethan with a perfect spring day. He stepped out of his car and stretched, breathing in the crisp, clean air. The scent of damp earth and new leaves was intoxicating, a smell he associated with a past he only visited in winter. He had set a goal for himself. This year, the Christmas gifts for Havenwood would be purchased with money he had earned himself. His plan was ambitious. He wasn't just opening new retail locations for his father's products. He was venturing into the restaurant business, a personal passion he was eager to explore. His father had been supportive. It's a tough industry, but the idea is solid. I can't stop you. And so here he was, in the town that held his past, ready to build his future. Ethan sat in his car, a stack of business plans on the passenger seat. First things first, he needed a place to live. A hotel felt impersonal. He knew the service in a town this size would be lackluster. He dialed Eleanor Vance's number. Eleanor, it's Ethan Hayes. Ethan, it's so good to hear from you. Is everything all right? Everything's great. I'm actually just outside of town. Would it be all right if I stopped by for a cup of coffee? Of course, you don't have to ask. Come on over. He stopped at a local bakery and picked up a cheesecake before heading to the centre. Eleanor greeted him with a warm hug. "What brings you here when it's not even Christmas?" She bustled around her small office, preparing coffee. "I'm here on business," he explained. "We're looking to open a branch of the company here." Eleanor sat down, a thoughtful look on her face. "I think that's wonderful. There aren't many opportunities for young people in this town. But why Havenwood specifically? There are larger towns nearby." "Havenwood is centrally located," he said, echoing his own business plan. "It's the perfect distribution hub for the entire region." He paused, then decided to ask, "Eleanor, is my father doing well?" Her cheeks flushed slightly. He's fine, I assume." Ethan watched her closely. "He sends his regards." She fell silent, staring out the window, and he realized he'd never known if she was married or had a family of her own. "Eleanor, I need a place to stay. I was hoping to find a room to rent, maybe with someone who could help with meals and laundry. I'll be working constantly, and I'm willing to pay very well." She tapped a pen on her desk, thinking, "I think I might know someone. An older woman, Mrs. Peterson. She used to work here as a cleaner, wonderfully tidy and kind. She retired because it became too strenuous. She lives in a large apartment and struggles to make ends meet on her pension." A few minutes later, Eleanor was on the phone. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson. It's Eleanor Vance." "Yes, I'm fine, thank you. I seem to recall you have a large apartment. A young acquaintance of mine has just moved to town and is looking for a room to rent. Someone to look after him a bit." She laughed. "Oh, he's a grown man, of course. Just very busy. Yes, I'll give him your address. He'll be over shortly." She hung up and smiled at Ethan. "I think you'll like Mrs. Peterson. She's a character." Ethan stood to leave but turned at the door. "Can I ask you something personal? Are you married? Do you have children?" She looked at him, her smile fading into something more wistful. "No. I poured everything into my work, into these children. My heart ached for them. The men I dated thought I was crazy, and they left. For years I told myself I'd find time for a personal life later. And then one day I looked up, and the train had left the station. But I have no regrets. These children are my life." Ethan left her office feeling a pang of sympathy for the kind woman who had helped him so much. As he drove, he thought about her reaction to his father's name. He pulled over and called his dad. "Hey, Dad, I made it. Just left Eleanor's office." He could have sworn he heard a catch in his father's voice. After a brief conversation, he hung up, a new thought taking root. "Maybe I'm a fool, but it seems my father is an even bigger one." He found the address in a historic part of town. The building was old but beautifully maintained, with intricate stonework over the windows and doorways. "Wow, a genuine landmark," he muttered to himself. As he was admiring the architecture, a tiny, elderly woman with bright, mischievous eyes approached him. "Like what you see, Sonny." He turned, startled. "It's magnificent. How old is this building?" She cackled. "Open your eyes, city boy. The date is carved right over the door." He looked up and laughed, embarrassed. The year 1912 was inscribed in 2-foot-high numerals. "My apologies. I'm looking for a Mrs. Peterson." "You found her. I'm Elara Peterson. Been waiting half an hour for you." "What took you so long? You could drive across this entire town in 15 minutes. He found himself smiling. He already liked her. "I'm sorry. I was distracted by how beautiful it is here in the spring." The apartment was like a time capsule. The furniture was antique, heavy, dark wood, and the walls were covered in oil paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. "Come on in," Elara said, leading him through the rooms. "I've got 4 rooms. This big living room, my bedroom, and 2 spare ones. This one here is the biggest and brightest. I think you'll be comfortable." The room was cozy, dominated by a massive, sturdy-looking bed and an enormous wardrobe. He noticed the desk had legs carved to look like lion's paws. "This is incredible." Elara waved a dismissive hand. "Just a bunch of old stuff." But he could tell she loved her home. "Now, the kitchen," she announced. "You'll need to write down what you like to eat and when. And give me some money for groceries. I mostly live on oatmeal and potatoes, and I have a feeling you're used to something different." Ethan chuckled and nodded. He was beginning to think this arrangement was going to work out perfectly. In fact, he was looking forward to it. A few hours later, after unpacking, Ilara knocked on his door. "Ethan, you never wrote down anything about your meals. Quit working and come have some tea. We'll sort it out." He closed his laptop. She was right. Over a cup of fragrant tea and some impossibly delicious homemade scones, they talked. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm not picky. I'll eat anything. I'll be up at different times, but never later than 8. And I can always heat things up myself." "Nonsense," she scoffed. "I'm not taking your money to have you cook for yourself. Just leave me cash for groceries, and I'll handle it. I hate shopping anyway, and you've got enough of that with your own work." "Deal," he said, placing a wad of cash on the table. She stared at it. "Is this for the next 6 months?" He was surprised. "No, that should cover the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just let me know when you need more." She shook her head, muttering about the price of delicacies. Her directness was refreshing, her lively intonations making it impossible to misunderstand her. He already felt more at home here than he ever had in his sterile Portland apartment with Tiffany. Ethan was working in his room when a tantalizing aroma began to waft from the kitchen. It was so distracting he finally had to close his laptop and investigate. He found Ilara sitting in front of an old television, engrossed in a soap opera he was sure had been on the air since he was a child. The screen flickered constantly. "Ilara, how can you watch that? It's hurting my eyes." She turned unfazed. "It's better than just listening, and it's not always flickering. Sometimes it behaves." As if on cue, the credits rolled, and the screen went dark. "Well, that's that. Let's eat, Ethan." The meal was incredible. A hearty beef stew with mushrooms, peppers, and potatoes, seasoned to perfection. He had eaten in some of the finest restaurants in the country, but he had never tasted anything so comforting and delicious. Leaning back, he sighed contentedly. "I have never eaten anything this good in my entire life." Ilara laughed. "Oh, this is nothing. If you think this is good, you should try my granddaughter's cooking. You'd die and go to heaven." Ethan chuckled at the thought, intrigued by this mysterious, culinary gifted granddaughter. He met the granddaughter 2 days later, under less than ideal circumstances. A sudden downpour had turned the streets into a series of small lakes. As Ethan turned into the courtyard of the apartment building, he saw a young woman walking along the edge of the flooded sidewalk. He saw her too late, and the tires of his SUV sent a massive wave of muddy water cascading over her. She leapt back with a yelp. He slammed on the brakes, feeling a pang of guilt. He rolled down the window to apologize. She turned to face him, and he was momentarily stunned. Her eyes, a vibrant, stormy grey, were flashing with pure fury. "I am so sorry," he stammered. "I didn't see you." She pulled out her earbuds, which explained why she hadn't heard him coming. "Sorry? Are you insane? You're speeding through a residential courtyard where people, children and pets walk. I wasn't speeding. I was driving carefully." "But with these puddles, you should compensate yourself with some common sense," she shot back. The insult was a bit much. "Excuse me, you're the one being rude." "Rude? From the guy who can't drive," she retorted, before spinning on her heel and stalking off. He gunned the engine in frustration, forgetting about the puddles. He shot past her, sending a second, even larger wave of water flying in her direction. In his rearview mirror, he saw her shaking a fist at him. After finally finding a parking spot, Ethan trudged upstairs, his mood soured by the encounter. Who did that woman think she was? He unlocked the door to the apartment and heard voices coming from the kitchen. He stepped in to say hello and froze in the doorway. Staring back at him were the same stormy grey eyes, now wide with disbelief. "Grandma," the young woman said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "is this the charming, monstrous driver who is now standing in your kitchen? Please don't tell me this is your new tenant." Ilara looked from one to the other, and then burst out laughing. "Well, I was wondering how I should introduce you two, but it seems you've already met." The granddaughter, whose name he now assumed was Chloe, jumped to her feet. "Grandma, it's not funny. I was just telling you how he soaked me with puddle water and then yelled at me." "Now, Chloe, calm down," Alara said. "I'm sure he didn't do it on purpose." "I've only known Ethan a short while, but he seems like a decent young man, and we both know how hot-headed you can be." As Chloe passed him to go change, her clothes dripping on the floor, Ethan couldn't resist a small, childish impulse. He discreetly stuck his tongue out at her. She caught the gesture, her nostrils flaring, and shot a quick glance at her grandmother before showing him a clenched fist. Alara, peering over her glasses, cleared her throat loudly. "I see everything, you two." Chloe huffed and disappeared into the bathroom. Ethan tried to compose his face into a serious expression, not wanting Alara to think he was as immature as her granddaughter. "Don't mind her," Alara said softly. "Chloe has a heart of gold, but a temper like a forest fire. She's always been that way. When she was 15, she got hit by a car. A little boy's ball rolled into the street, and without thinking, she darted out to save it. She got the ball back to the kid, then collapsed. A month in the hospital. She always acts first and thinks later." Ethan felt a grudging respect for the fiery young woman. She was impulsive and reckless, but she was also brave. She was real. When Chloe returned, wearing dry clothes, she found Ethan alone in the kitchen. She plopped down on the bench across from him, an awkward silence stretching between them. Finally, he broke it. "Look, Chloe, can we call a truce? I'm not as bad as you think I am. I honestly didn't mean to splash you. I'm sorry." She looked at him, surprised by the sincere apology, and a small smile touched her lips. "Well, then I'm sorry too. It was my fault for not paying attention. These headphones are going to get me into real trouble one day." He smiled and held out his pinky finger. "Truce?" She laughed, a genuine, warm sound, and hooked her own pinky around his. "Truce. No more fighting." They stayed up late talking, long after Alara had gone to bed. Ethan found himself telling her about his business plans. "So, you're just going to go to all the local cafes and restaurants and try their food? That's your job?" "Essentially, yes." "Oh, wow," she said, her eyes wide. "That's the best job ever." An idea sparked in Ethan's mind. "Chloe, would you be willing to help me?" "How could I help?" she asked, confused. "Well, if I go to all these places alone, people will get suspicious. It'll look like I'm casing the competition. But if I'm with a beautiful woman," he added with a charming smile, "everyone will just assume I'm a guy trying to impress his date." Her eyes widened. "You want me to go on dates with you? For your work?" "Exactly. Think of it as a consulting gig. The company will cover all expenses, of course." Chloe hesitated for only a moment, the allure of the adventure too strong to resist. "I'm in." Ethan smiled. "Great. How's your wardrobe for a fancy restaurant? I'd like to start at the top." Her face fell slightly. "I don't really have anything like that. I have one nice dress I bought for a friend's wedding." He felt a pang of regret, realizing how his question might have sounded. "That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "It's just that, well, that dress will be perfect." He was surprised by how much he was looking forward to it. To Ethan's surprise, Chloe was perfectly at ease in the formal setting of the town's most expensive restaurant. She navigated the array of silverware with an elegance that defied his preconceived notions. As they were seated, however, the establishment's flaws became immediately apparent. The supposedly fine linen tablecloth was dotted with faint, old stains. It spoke of either a tight budget or a lazy owner. They waited nearly 10 minutes for a waiter, despite the dining room being almost empty. When he finally arrived, he informed them that more than half of the items on the menu were unavailable. Chloe smiled sweetly at the bored-looking young man. "To save your valuable time, perhaps you could just tell us what you do have." The waiter, who seemed more interested in the vibrating phone in his pocket, quickly rattled off a short list of options. They placed their order, a sense of disappointment already settling in. "It's a bit sad, isn't it?" Chloe whispered with a smile. "And trust me, this is considered one of the best places in town." The food, when it arrived, was nearly inedible. Ethan pushed his plate away after one bite. He watched Chloe, who was eating with a hunger that suggested she'd missed a meal. "I worked late and didn't have time for dinner," she explained, catching his eye. "Where do you work?" "At a small apparel factory," she said, with a wave of her hand. "We make tracksuits." "Did you study fashion?" he asked, intrigued. She laughed. "No. I always dreamed of being a chef, a real one who creates amazing dishes. But I ended up getting a degree in accounting, and now I work in a sewing factory. Funny how life works out, right?" When the waiter brought the bill, which was exorbitant for the quality of the meal, Chloe started to protest. Ethan gently squeezed her hand to silence her. He tore a page from his pocket notebook and wrote a few lines on it. "Young man, is the owner in?" The waiter sighed. "Yeah, why? You gonna complain?" "No," Ethan said smoothly. "Just give him this note for me." The waiter glanced at the note, his eyes widening as he read it. He nodded and disappeared. The note was simple. "I'm interested in buying your restaurant. Name your price. Ethan Hayes." As they left the restaurant, Ethan suggested a walk. The night was clear and cool, and they strolled through the quiet streets, talking about everything and nothing. He found himself captivated by her passion, her humour, and her unvarnished view of the world. He learned that she lived just a few blocks from her grandmother. When they reached her building, he stopped, looking down at her under the soft glow of the porch light. Without thinking, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle, tentative kiss at first, but it deepened as she responded, her arms wrapping around his neck. It was unlike any kiss he'd ever experienced. It wasn't a transaction or a performance. It was a connection. He walked home in a daze, a smile playing on his lips. For the first time in years, he felt something real, something that wasn't part of a business plan. As he entered his own building, a gruff voice called out from the shadows. "You the guy who wants to buy my restaurant?" A rough-looking man with prison tattoos stepped forward. "I'm the owner. We need to talk." The next day, Ethan bought the restaurant. The owner, a man who had recently inherited the place from a grandfather he barely knew, was ecstatic to sell. "I don't know the first thing about this business," he confessed. "I just got out of prison, and this place has been nothing but a headache. I owe money all over town. Now I can finally pay everyone off and take a trip. I've never even seen the ocean." Ethan got the property for a fraction of its market value. He now had the foundation for his new venture. That evening, he called Chloe. "So, where are we going tonight?" she asked, her voice bright and cheerful. "Actually, tonight we're driving, not walking. It's a surprise." He needed to go back to Portland to procure equipment and staff, and he knew he had to tell her. He drove them out of town to a small, secluded lake he discovered that afternoon. "Are we having a picnic?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Even better," he said, pulling a cooler from the back seat. "I'm making my signature grilled steaks." They sat by the water, drinking wine and laughing, and he found himself falling for her hard and fast. As the sun set, casting a warm, golden light over the lake, Chloe's expression grew serious. "Ethan, how are you planning on driving back? You've been drinking." He looked at her, his heart in his throat. "I was hoping we could spend the night here. The thing is, Chloe, I have to go back to Portland tomorrow for a couple of weeks, and the thought of not seeing you for that long is unbearable." He knew it sounded like a cheesy line from a romantic comedy, but he meant every word. To his surprise, he saw tears welling up in her eyes. He gently wiped one away with his thumb. "I bought that restaurant," he explained. "I have to get everything in order, hire staff, buy equipment. It's not forever. I'm planning on living here, Chloe. For good." She leaned into him, her lips finding his. He picked her up in his arms and carried her to the car. Later, as they lay tangled together under a blanket, she whispered, "Ethan, I've never. You're the first." A jolt went through him. He held her tighter, a fierce protective feeling rising in his chest. He had never felt this way before. This was different. This was real. He only managed 2 hours of sleep before his alarm went off. After a cold shower, he found a note from Alara on the kitchen table saying she'd gone to the market. It was for the best. He didn't know how he could face Chloe's grandmother. He left a stack of cash on the table with a note of his own. "Thank you for everything. I've gone back to the city. Please buy yourself a new television." His father greeted him at the door of their Chicago home with a long hug. "Son, you look different. Older, more mature." "Dad, I've only been gone for a couple of weeks." "I know," Julian said, clapping him on the back, "but you left as my son and came back as a CEO. Come, show me everything." Before they could talk business, Maria, their housekeeper, for as long as he could remember, intercepted them. "Where are you taking that boy? He's hungry and tired from the road. Let him eat first." Julian threw up his hands in surrender. Ethan smiled. It was good to be home, but a part of him had remained behind by a quiet lake in Havenwood. While he was eating, his father filled him in on the news. "Tiffany stopped by a few times, kept asking where you were. She even threatened to fly out and find you." Ethan snorted. "I wonder why." Julian shrugged. "You know better than I do. There must be a reason." Ethan thought about Tiffany. She was beautiful, poised, a perfect partner for a rising businessman. She was also ambitious and a little greedy. But weren't they all? His mind immediately conjured an image of Chloe, her fiery spirit and genuine laugh. He pushed the thought away. Chloe was a wonderful distraction, a beautiful memory, but a future with her was impossible. She was too simple, too naive for his world. He needed someone like Tiffany by his side at galas and fundraisers. The rest of the evening was spent poring over plans for the new restaurant. Julian was impressed. "You've done incredible work, son. And you got the place for a steal. I noticed on the map there's a family entertainment centre nearby. You should create a kids menu, run some targeted ads. It could be a gold mine." Ethan stared at the map. "Dad, you're a genius. I didn't even think of that." What should have been a 2-week trip stretched into 3 months. Just as he was preparing to return to Havenwood, his father suffered a major stroke. He collapsed on the front walkway of their home. Maria found him, and her quick thinking saved his life. The recovery was slow, and Ethan stayed by his side. Tiffany, meanwhile, grew impatient. When Julian was finally on the mend, she announced she was coming with Ethan to Havenwood. He was too exhausted to argue. He had already found and purchased a small cottage on the outskirts of town, a place to call his own. Tiffany arrived with a mountain of luggage and immediately began redecorating, turning the cosy cottage into a gaudy showcase of designer brands. Housekeepers came and went, unable to meet her impossible standards, and the house was in a constant state of disarray. Ethan threw himself into his work, spending as much time as possible at the restaurant, which was now undergoing a massive renovation. She was a constant distraction, until he finally laid down the law: stay away from his work, or the money would be cut off. It was a temporary fix, but it gave him the space he needed. Today, her intrusion had been the final straw. His phone rang again. He sighed, expecting it to be Tiffany, but it was his father. "Dad, is everything okay? Son, I've known you your whole life. I can hear it in your voice." "What happened?" Ethan sank into his office chair. "Dad, what do you do when a woman wants to marry you, run your life, be everywhere you are, and you want none of it?" "Tiffany," Julian stated. "Son, you brought this on yourself. You let it go on for years. You never told her the truth. At this point, you either marry her or you face the consequences, and there will be a scandal." "I know, Dad, but I can't. I don't want to see her ever again." "Well, son," Julian said with a heavy sigh, "it looks like I'm not getting any grandchildren from you anytime soon." Ethan laughed despite himself. "Is that all you care about?" "Pretty much. Anyway, that's not why I called." "You're going to the centre for the Christmas party tomorrow, right?" "Yeah, why?" There was a pause. "I was thinking, I'd like to come too." Ethan was taken aback. "I'd be happy to have you, Dad, but you haven't been back since I moved here. Is this about Eleanor?" He could hear his father's heavy breathing on the other end of the line. "You could say that," Julian admitted, his voice thick with regret. "I made a terrible mistake, son. A long time ago. She meant a great deal to me, and I to her. But I offered to make her my mistress. I told her I'd give her anything she wanted if she'd come to Chicago with me." Ethan was speechless. "You're serious? What did she do?" "She slapped me across the face and told me to get out of her sight and never come back. And my pride, my stupid, arrogant pride, was so wounded that I did just that. All these years, son. All these years wasted. I'm an old man now, but I can't forget her. I'm not making that mistake again." The confession hit Ethan hard. "Dad," he said softly, "I'm not sure which one of us is the bigger fool." His father chuckled sadly. "At least you're coming to your senses sooner than I did. I'll see you tomorrow." Ethan drove home, determined to end things with Tiffany once and for all. The house was quiet. He assumed she was out with the few friends she had made in town. But then he heard her voice, a low murmur coming from the bedroom. She was on the phone. He walked silently toward the door. "Kitten, don't be mad. I can't do anything. The idiot is being stubborn. What am I supposed to do? Tell him I'm pregnant so he'll finally marry me? What if he figures out it's not true before he puts a ring on my finger?" Ethan froze. A man's voice, smooth and deep, replied from the phone speaker. "Lisa, you've been feeding me promises for a year. I'm not going to wait forever." Ethan pushed the door open. "Am I interrupting?" Tiffany shrieked and pulled the covers up to her chin. A handsome, gym-built man scrambled out of the bed, pulling on his clothes. "Hey, man! I'm out of here! This is not my drama." He scurried past Ethan without a second glance. Tiffany glared at him. "This is your fault." He laughed, a humorless sound. "I'm not even going to argue with that. Do you need help packing your bags, or can you manage on your own?" 2 hours later, after a storm of tears, insults and thrown objects, Tiffany was gone. A profound sense of relief washed over Ethan. He was finally free. He drove to the Havenwood Youth Centre. The children were still out on their holiday trip, but he knew Eleanor would be there, personally overseeing the setup for the Christmas party. As he walked up the path, the centre's resident dog, a giant fluffy mutt, aptly named Dog, trotted over for a pet. He remembered when the kids had found him as a puppy, hiding him until he got too big to fit under their beds. Eleanor had nearly had a heart attack and was ready to send him to a shelter, but the children's collective tears had convinced her to let him stay. He opened the door to the centre. The main hall was filled with the scent of pine. Eleanor and a few staff members were decorating a massive Christmas tree. "Ethan," she called out, a look of surprise on her face. "You're a day early." "Just wanted to check in," he said, his eyes scanning the room. Then he saw it, a slight movement behind the lower branches of the tree. Someone was hiding. "All right, come on out of there," he said playfully, crouching down. The branches parted and a small boy, no older than 4, stepped out. He stared up at Ethan with a look of stern disapproval, and Ethan felt the world tilt on its axis. He was staring at his own face, in miniature, the same dark hair, the same jawline, and the same intense, deep blue eyes. His mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be a coincidence. The resemblance was too perfect, too absolute. The boy was a tiny echo of himself. He felt a sudden, inexplicable nervousness and ran a hand over his face, a habit he'd tried to break for years. In perfect synchrony, the little boy raised a small hand and rubbed his own face in the exact same way. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes finding Eleanor's. She looked terrified. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Who is this boy? Is he a new resident? Was he abandoned?" She wrung her hands, avoiding his gaze. "Why are you asking, Ethan?" Her evasion was all the confirmation he needed. "Don't play dumb with me, Eleanor. You can't tell me you don't see this." She stared intently from the boy to Ethan and back again. See what? I don't see any resemblance. The lie was so blatant it was insulting. A hot anger surged through him. Fine. If you can't see it, maybe we should get a second opinion. The little boy took a hesitant step forward and held out a small, sticky candy. Don't yell, he said, his voice surprisingly firm. Ethan took the candy, his anger dissolving into confusion. Thank you, he mumbled. I won't. He turned back to Eleanor, his voice pleading. Tell me where he came from. I have a right to know. He wasn't abandoned, and he has nothing to do with you. The voice came from behind him, a voice he hadn't heard in years, but one that was seared into his memory. He knew without turning who it was. Chloe. 1,000 what-ifs and regrets crashed over him. He had tried to call, to text, to apologize, but his pride had always gotten in the way, and she had never reached out to him either. The puzzle pieces slammed together in his mind with brutal force. The boy who looked just like him, Chloe, the woman he had carelessly walked away from. There was only one possible conclusion. He watched as the little boy ran to her. Mommy! Chloe scooped him into her arms, holding him tight. Finally, Ethan turned and met her gaze. It was cold, defiant, and filled with the pain he knew he had caused. Hello, Chloe. Ethan, she replied, her voice flat. She turned and walked toward the exit without another word. He stood there frozen, feeling like the world's biggest fool. He had a son, and he had walked away from him. In the quiet of Eleanor's office, the whole story came out. Chloe had come to his house in Portland desperate. Their son Leo was seriously ill, and she couldn't afford the treatments. But it was Tiffany who had answered the door. Seeing the situation for what it was, she had threatened Chloe, telling her she would use the Hayes family's power to take her child away if she ever came near Ethan again. Heartbroken and terrified, Chloe had sold her grandmother's apartment and taken Leo to a specialist out of state, saving his life on her own. The weight of his ignorance of Tiffany's cruelty crushed Ethan. His father Julian arrived in the middle of the confession, and upon hearing the news of his grandson, he offered his son the first piece of genuine wisdom he'd ever shared. Don't make my mistakes, son. Don't let pride and circumstance rob you of a lifetime of happiness. All night, Ethan raced to Chloe's small apartment, his car filled with every toy he could find. He found her and his son, and for the first time, he didn't run. He apologized, he begged, he promised. He chose to stay. The story culminates in a double wedding, a joyous celebration under the Oregon sky. Ethan marries Chloe, with little Leo as his best man, and Julian finally marries Eleanor, his first and only love, proving that it's never too late for a second chance. They found their way back to each other, a family forged not by obligation, but by a love that refused to be forgotten. Thank you for watching this story to the end. We hope it touched your heart. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment in your life that completely changed your path? We'd love to hear about it.